Okay. Well, welcome everybody. Looks like we're live here. So just want to start the talk here. My name is Gabriel Agboruche. And again, welcome to B-Sides Vancouver 2022. This is my first time speaking at this event, and I am liking it. I've been backstage. I've been listening to all of what has been going on, from incident response to, I think other people cover ICS and OT subjects, pen testing, and all these different subjects in security. They give me a lot of joy and a lot of happiness within my heart because I have a very strong love for this industry. So again, Gabriel Agboruche, and I work for an organization called Accenture. We're a consulting firm. Specifically, we have a very technical focus. And specifically, I'm in the OT or ICS and OT cybersecurity practice, and I serve as a manager. Let me see how to progress. Okay, I can progress, which is awesome. Okay, a little bit more background about myself. Again, Gabriel Agboruche, and you see all these little pictures here to the left. I'll start to the right with all the boring stuff, and then I'll get to the left where it's more of the cool stuff. So on the right, those are all the certifications and the degrees from the Cisco certs to the SAN certs. And my bachelor's degree is actually in electrical engineering. So I come from a little bit less of a tech background or IT administration. A lot of people have like masters of information systems or computer science. Specifically come from very traditional electrical engineering, where we go over the calculus and physics and all types of other very technical but not tech type of subject matter, very math intensive. And then later I decided to go forward with a bachelor's in cybersecurity technology because I love the field so much. Kind of a little bit more about me, as it says, I'm a regular speaker at like the SANS conferences. For those who are very familiar with cybersecurity, spoken at the SANS ICS summits. I've been talking at the Hack the Capital. Actually have that one tomorrow. I'm going to be speaking at in SANS Oil and Gas Summit, SANS New to Cyber. So I'm kind of like a SANS junkie here. I've also participated in some of the largest OT incident response engagements in some of our lifetime today. One specifically, you can I'm able to mention is that of the Colonial Pipeline incident. So I was involved in responding to that one with the previous firm I was with, and that was just a whole different thing. Connect with me offline. I have my socials and everything. I can tell you more about that, possibly, of course, with not going into too much detail for customer confidentiality. So on the left, right, so you see me with an instrument. I actually play sousaphone. So I'm a low brass musician, and I play with a band called the Gabriel Brass Band. And I typically tell people it's not my band. I play for the band, even though that's my name. But the last name of the band leader is Gabriel. So that's why it's called the Gabriel Brass Band. But sometimes I say it's mine too. So, for certain crowds. I'm also a YouTuber, right? I have a YouTube channel where I go over, it's called Struggle Security. More info about that at the end. But I go over very high level cybersecurity information. I have a tagline which says that normalizing struggling in cybersecurity, because it's not always easy. And struggling is okay in this field. And I'm also on Twitter under ICS Gabe. And also the last one, right? I'm going to be a new dad coming up soon. So I'll be having my first child coming up this November. So loading, baby baking right now. So I'm looking forward to it. And so all of that stuff. So the picture at the bottom left is a picture of myself at a nuclear plant. That's the nuclear plant I used to work at. And might as well talk about it now, right? I used to work at a nuclear plant as a nuclear INC engineer. So like I said, my bachelor's is in electrical engineering, and nuclear power is a subset, right? That's part of the generation of electricity. So my degree in the nuclear kind of went hand in hand. So that's me at the bottom left. I was at the nuclear plant, and we had some visitors from Japan where they had previously had the Fukushima, the Fukushima incident at their nuclear plants, where there was a hurricane, a tsunami combined with an earthquake, which caused there to be issues at their nuclear plant. So they were coming to us because we had a very similar nuclear reactor, and they were kind of making their U.S. kind of tour. So that was a very interesting experience for me while I was there. So, okay, so let's get into the subject. Let me give you the premise here, because this is This is very much so kind of intention for those who might be red teamers or incident responders, but this is a very common attack vector for what you call OT or ICS. So OT stands for operational technology, and ICS stands for industrial control systems. These two a lot of times can be synonymous. ICS and OT, you hear them back to back. So because I'm in this field, this is kind of what I want to go over here because and I don't have my animations, but that is okay. So one thing about these environments, so what you're seeing on the screen here is a very common architecture for OT environments. You see there at the top where it says level 4, which is typically like the business side of an organization. So I used to work for an electrical utility organization that owned a nuclear plant. So that equivalency would be all the corporate offices, those people in HR, those people in sales, the executives. That will be there at the top where you see the web servers, the mail servers, you see engineering, regular workstations, and that type of environment. And they have a direct connection into the internet. One more level below, you see the level 3.5, which is typically that of the DMZ. This is the area where like the demilitarized zone, where you have all your antivirus, you'll have all your other security things, which pretty much acts as a buffer layer between IT and OT. So level 4 is typically considered IT, and that level 3 is considered OT. So that 3.5 is somewhere in between there, where you have your intrusion detection systems, antivirus, as I mentioned before, and then you go down to your 3, which this is very much so OT environment, right? This might be a particular station building where you have your engineering workstations, you have your data historians, you have these type of assets, which are kind of monitoring those systems within your OT environment. And one that I mentioned for OT was nuclear, but you can have oil and gas, you can have your building management systems, you can have electrical utilities, grid type of functions, you name it. These all fall into the categories of ICS and OT, even water treatment or reservoir or wind power, you name it. Mining is another one that I've been getting into lately. So, you name it. These are all OT type of environments. So that level 3 is that of systems within that. So then you see your level 2, which is your supervision. So this is where you're supervising or monitoring what's happening at those lower layers, right? What's happening in your reactor core, what's happening in your tunnels or your fuel pumps, looking at levels, looking at pressure, looking at temperature of these different components, or even looking at a conveyor line for an automotive plant where you see different automotive parts going down a line. That's there in that level 2. You're monitoring that. But then your level 1 and your level 0 are specifically what's happening in those processes. So you have your HMI that you see there, your human machine interface. You have your safety systems that are also in some of these environments. But as you see all the way at the bottom, you have your pumps. You have your RTUs, which stands for remote terminal units. You have your IEDs for intelligent electrical devices. You have your PLCs, which stand for programmable logic controllers. I don't want you to get confused by all of the jargon. I kind of want you to just understand what a typical OT architecture looks like. And this is typically what it looks like. But one common asset, and that's the theme. Now we're getting to the theme of the conversation, is that printers. You see that at the top. I don't have my animation, but I wanted to show as each one of the little lines goes down to every single one of those layers. Printers are a very common asset that is aligned with every single one of these layers for a typical OT architecture. And also you see to the right, these are some common attack vectors where it's insecure remote access, infected USB drives, insecure authentication, clear text credentials, denial of service or resource exhaustion. You name it. A lot of these attack vectors apply to OT architectures. And the thing about it is that printers are in every single one of these layers. And I've seen this very commonly. So I just want to kind of lay that foundation out there as we move forward, is that's why I think that this is a undervalued asset in OT architectures or OT environments, because printers are everywhere and there are common attack vectors which apply to every single one of these layers. So I think that this is an asset that needs greater consideration. And I want to go into what I've done during internal pen tests in order to kind of take advantage of this asset that's everywhere. So let's move forward here. Okay, so I want to give you a couple of examples of where I've seen this. So BMS and BAS. So BMS stands for Building Management Systems / Building Automation Systems. So this is anything as it concerns heating and cooling. So HVAC systems. You have your, as you see in this example, all the way to the left is the example. Your garage door systems, your elevators, escalators. You have your fire alarm and fire suppression type of systems. But there's a little arrow here that you all can probably see, is that all in the midst of this, right here by the fire alarm system, and actually it was in other places, you see a printer. A printer is right here within the building management system, building automation system. And this is an actual architecture from a customer environment that I did a walk down of, very large organization. And printers were there within this OT type of system. I've blurred out all of the information associated with this customer, so you won't be able to know who they are. But just want to let you know that within building management systems and building automation systems, printers exist there. Now, there on the right, you have a typical architecture of a nuclear plant environment. So you see here that you have your internet, and that's kind of common to what I showed for the general architecture. And for internet connecting to your business systems, right? Those IT with HR and sales. That's that environment separated by firewalls. And typically in nuclear plant environments, you have something called a data diode, which only allows data to go in one direction, which is out of the nuclear plant environment. But I've seen very commonly where you see the control room, I've seen commonly that there are printers within the control room. I've even been in control rooms, nuclear plant control rooms, where next to the reactor engineering stations, there's a printer sitting right there. Right? Control engineers, process engineers, reactor engineers, they want to be able to print out information as it concerns what's happening within the OT environment. And typically printers are very common there. So even within the control room, kind of the heart and breath of a nuclear plant, you see printers right there in the midst. So those are two examples there. This is another example. So this is another walk down of a system. Again, actual environments, actual architectures. And these are pictures that I took while I was there. So this is an oil and gas compressor station control room. And boom, right here, you see that you have this is small for me, so sorry for zooming in with me looking, but you have your WAN connections out here that's going specifically to your wide area network, right? That's more towards the internet, connecting to your telecom. But then going into the plant environment, you have a printer here next to all these workstations, right? So you see that you have your primary workstation, secondary workstation. You have your desk control, right? That's where your Ethernet jacks and everything are. You have your telephone systems and your alarm systems. But boom, right here, you have a printer. And this is an actual, on the right, you have an actual show of where that printer is. It's sitting right here on top of a server next to all of these workstations and laptops that you see here. Common. Printers are very common. I just want to drill that down. Printers are very common in OT environments. The next one is of that same customer with an oil. So this is the main control room. This is like the central control unit or central control area for the whole oil and gas plant or the whole oil and gas station. So this connects several different stations together, and the control is right here, just showing an emphasis on how important this environment is. So you see, you have your laptops. These are human machine interfaces that are showing what's happening in the OT environment. These are probably some levels and some temperatures and some pressures, what's happening within the pipes. But then boom, right here, you have a printer sitting right here next to all this important stuff. Again, I think that many of us in OT security, or even individuals not in this environment, need to understand the importance of printers in these type of environments. So now I'm gonna get into the attack, and again, just kind of laying out the foundation a little bit more with this, is that with the attack, this is something that I've used on multiple occasions. I've used this multiple times in order to gain an initial foothold into OT environments using this particular attack. And that's really what you do for many pen tests, because typically pen tests, what you are looking to do is that you're establishing so what we typically did was that we did an assumed breach type of perspective. So that's where we're going here, setting the stage for the attack. So this is typically an internal pen test or red team, which means that the customer and the firm that I work for, we had an understanding that there's assumed breach perspective, where we're going to assume that the bad guy is already in the environment, right? Phishing attacks, like I was showing you with the common attack vectors, phishing attacks, internal threats with plugging in infected USB drives, remote connections not really being monitored. All these different attack vectors really allow the bad guys to get in at times very easily. So many organizations want to understand with these internal pen tests for OT specifically to try to understand, hey, once the bad guys get in, how far can they go? What can they do? What systems can they move to? And what vulnerabilities pretty much exist within OT and the overall OT environment? I've seen many times where we'll start off, as I showed you in the previous architecture, we'll start off in the business side. So they'll throw us on a VM, they'll throw us on some type of laptop or some type of system within their business systems or their business architecture and say, hey, can you go from the business environment to the OT environment? Can you bypass firewalls? Can you capture credentials of individuals within IT? And that will gain you the ability to transition over into OT. So many times what we'll start off by doing is a very typical IT pen test, internal pen test, where we're looking at getting domain admin credentials for that Active Directory environment in order for us to be able to manipulate the environment so we can jump into OT and find whatever we can find as it concerns vulnerabilities. So that's one of the things that's kind of setting the stage here for this type of attack. Another one is that one of the prerequisites is that a Microsoft Active Directory environment is required. So many times, and this is very, very common, like I said here, many customers desire to test the ability to move from IT to OT, start there in the or start there from the OT environment. But Active Directory is something that's very common. So in OT architectures, like I was mentioning before, there's all these servers, there's all these workstations. They're typically Windows systems. So Microsoft Active Directory is very common within OT, but that's a requirement here. There are some OT environments where there's none. There's times where you can see as little infrastructure, right, networking or just overall infrastructure, where I've seen unmanaged switches that connect directly to workstations and servers. And that's kind of isolated on its own environment, has its own subnet and everything. So it can be very bare there. So this attack wouldn't apply to that type of environment. And like I mentioned, right, not all OT environments implement Microsoft AD, but it's very common for managing Windows systems. So when you have network connected printers, many times it is in the Active Directory environment. When you have servers, authentication servers, or data historians, that's another asset that is typically a Windows server within OT. You will have an Active Directory environment. And the third prerequisite or setting the stage for the attack is that these need to be network connected printers. We're talking about printers with Ethernet connections to LANs and wireless printers that authenticate to the local OT domains. So those are some of the prerequisites for setting the stage for the attacks. These things need to be in place in order for this attack to be successful. So let's continue here. And these are the steps. So I'm going to step you through each one of these and each one of these things that you can do in order to execute this type of attack. And I'm also going to follow. So I'm not just going to throw it out there to say, hey, this is how you can do this bad thing. But I'm also going to finish it out by giving some hardening and some recommendations on what you can give to your customers or what organizations can even do today in order to protect against this particular type of attack where it's been very easy to do. So the first one, like many times people do, or many pen testers do with an internal pen test, is that you start to scan and you search. So you're doing your reconnaissance, but you're not only doing just basic reconnaissance for vulnerable systems, you're specifically scanning and searching for printers. You're looking for printer devices. And think about it, right? I mean, for those who are IT administrators or domain administrators, are you really protecting your printers? Are you really looking at like, okay, let's see who's trying to compromise my printer? No, you're looking at workstations, you're looking at laptops, you're looking at servers. Those are your high value assets there. So this looking and searching for printers, scanning for those type of devices, making it very specific to the type of searching that you're doing is kind of, many of this activity flies under the radar. I've spoken to customers which were kind of doing at times a purple team type of scenario. When I say purple team, I mean that I'm doing the internal pen tests, and that defending organization, or those who are a part of the SIM or the SOC, the Security Operations Center organization, are looking for evidences of my activity. And when I've done this, they were not able to detect the activity that I was doing. They were not able to detect what I was doing. And this is kind of somewhat of what you call LOL or LOL, right? Living off the land. You're utilizing the, well, probably living off the land is a little later. So I'll get into that a little later. But a lot of, I would say this for step one, many of this type of activity for scanning and searching for printers is a bit imperceptible to many defenders. So like I mentioned, you can use some very common tools. You can use Nmap, you can use Metasploit, and another one called Eyewitness, which I've used very often in order to search for these devices. So Eyewitness is here. This is a GitHub for Eyewitness, and pretty much what it does is it searches for any internet or like port, TCP port 80, 8080, 443. It searches for those within the internal network, and it takes a screenshot of what it finds once that web page or that web type of application pops up. So it can be used to find printers or any other type of devices in the environment. And it's very quick if you've ever used Eyewitness before. So that might be something that you might want to consider. Another one, like I mentioned before, is Nmap, but making that scan very specific to the type of ports that you're looking for, because Nmap has the can just send off all types of packets that are very detectable by defenders. So as you see, I have an Nmap and I have a flag for P, which is that for port, the 9100, 515, 631, and I'm just searching to see if these are open. And I have, again, blurring out for any customer information. And as you see here, there were some printers that popped up here. So you see that of the 515 that popped up, and that's associated with printer services. 9100 for Jet Direct, right? So we see that these are open. So these and the IP addresses are here for all of these devices. So what I'm doing here is first I'm scanning for these devices, and then I'm taking them and putting them into some type of text file so I can launch further attack or further enumeration of these type of systems. So that's what I'm doing there with Nmap. Okay. And the next thing that you do, so we're moving on for number one, where you're scanning and searching for these devices. Once you find them, these are some common ports where I mentioned 80, 443, 9100, 515, and 631. Oh, and the reason why these are on port 80, 8080, 443 is because many times these printers have some type of web interface, right? Some type of web application running on them so that you can manage them, so that you can get into these devices, that you can change settings, so you can manage them. And that's kind of more of that living off the land I was speaking of. So number two, that's when you're getting into that of checking for printer default credentials. So organizations often leave their printers with default credentials, not only for just to manage them or getting access to them, or even administrative access. So there's default credentials for so many printers that are just sprawled over the internet. And there are many like repositories that'll just give you, hey, what's the default credentials for a HP printer of this type of version, or a Xerox printer, or a Zebra printer? Any of these type of printers, you can see that you can find the default credentials online. So let me show you a little bit of that, of what I found. And again, this isn't just something that I'm making up. This isn't just something that I'm saying. This is something that I've used and executed, and these are some of the examples here. This is a Xerox printer of a Atla Link something. I don't know the exact versions. I can't see that small, but as you see here, I just point out here that this gives me admin access with these default credentials, administrative access directly to the printer, because nobody typically changes printer credentials. Another one for HP, page wide, color flow, whatever, I don't know. Another arrow here, administrator access, default credentials for a HP printer. And this is another one. I never even heard of this version of the printer before, but I found the default credentials online from just simple Googles and simple Bings and simple whatever. Image Runner Advanced. Never heard of this type of printer ever before in my life. Administrator access directly to that printer. So that is the step two here. You find your default credentials for administrative access to the printer. And now you're getting into the quote unquote fun part, right? Changing the settings. So this is utilizing the services that are running on the printers in order to change them so that you can do something to try to discover those vulnerabilities. So you change where the printers authenticate by modifying the LDAP setting. So LDAP, it is a service that many printers and devices use in order to authenticate to different systems in the environment, right? So LDAP is used for many printers as like a very small, like address book type of service. And you can change the credentials of the printer, not by something very difficult, but by, let me show you, utilize, I don't know why I put that there. I just threw that up there. But by using the settings or using the internet. So this is a web page that I popped up, right? So you can change the LDAP configuration settings right here on the web page that Xerox provides to you, right? So you can you can just follow these steps in order to change the LDAP settings. And let me tell you a little bit more of what you're doing here. You're not only changing the settings, you're changing the settings to make the printer authenticate to you as the attacker. So typically in these settings, here, I think I have a screenshot of this. Typically within the settings, you are giving an IP address and you're giving a port number in order to authenticate to. But here I have it specifically, and this is where I actually changed the settings inside of this Xerox printer. You change the IP address to your own attacker machine, and then you change the port that it authenticates to, which I changed to 3333. And then when that printer goes ahead and tries to do an authentication type of event, it sends those clear text credentials directly to your attacker machine. And let me tell you how you do that. And feel free to start to load the comment section up with questions because I can go into more detail, but just for the interest of time and to make sure I get your questions, I'm not going to go into so much detail into protocols and how to break those things down. But the way so once you change the settings to your attacker machine, which is the IP address and the port directly within the administrative access of these printers, you set up what you call Netcat, a Netcat listener. So if you, for those who don't know about Netcat, it's a networking type of tool which allows you to capture and to monitor different network events. Specifically, many attackers use it, or many ethical hackers use it. So what you're doing is that you're going to set up a Netcat listener on your machine, and then you're going to also, and after that, you're going to initiate an LDAP query, where, as you saw a little bit, hopefully you can see this. I can barely see it, but what I did here is that I initiated an LDAP query event. I just searched for myself, right? Gabriel Agboruche at whatever. And that initiated an authentication event on this printer. And then because I had that Netcat listener that's specified on that port 3333, I was able to do this here multiple times. So let me just kind of break this down a little bit. So I'm using Netcat. That's the tool. That's the command line tool. And it comes with Kali Linux. So this isn't something that you have to set up or anything. There's a Netcat listener. So that L stands for listener. V stands for verbose, or the output is verbose. And the port that you're listening on is that 3333. And like I mentioned before, that 3333 is something I just set it up as. You can make it anything. You can make it 1111, 2570, whatever. It doesn't matter. So I set it up to listen on this port after I changed my attacker machine as the thing that the printer would try to authenticate to using the LDAP protocol. And as you see here, I just kind of pointed out again, don't want to show any customer information, but you see number one is that, as I listed, and that's the domain. So that'll be specific to the Active Directory domain that you're in, where the customer has put you. Number two specifically is the username, clear text username of the printer, right? It might be something Xerox or whatever, or something associated with the organization. And then the password is right here. I just gave you a little bit of the second part of the password, but it's this and 2004B or 2040B. That question mark it's just a mush. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just a mush after I tested it the second time. So again, right, you got into the printer. I just want to kind of outline this a little bit more, going through the steps of what actually happens. First, you scan for these printers. You found them. You put it into some type of text file, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna go and do my dirt, right? I'm gonna go and find a vulnerability. You put in default credentials for that printer in order to gain administrative access of that device. You change the LDAP settings where the printer doesn't authenticate to the LDAP server, but it rather tries to authenticate to you as the attacker. And you change that port. You set up a netcat listener on your home machine where you're listening on the port that you changed it to, and then you initiate an LDAP query in that printer because it has the capability within every printer. You set up an LDAP query, and that forces the printer to finally like use those credentials, and it sends it to you directly in clear text. I just want to pause here just to show you this is what the result is, right? And kind of giving even more emphasis is that, again, these printers exist within every single level, within whether IT, whether OT, it exists everywhere. And very many times, very close to high value assets within OT environments. So I think that I just want to give you the emphasis there. And you might be asking yourself, so what? You have printer credentials within an environment. You have printer credentials. Printer credentials isn't a domain admin. They're not even a regular user, right? Or they're not even a privileged user within the Active Directory environments. The thing that's valuable about this is that this is an initial foothold. You don't really you can do so much with very little privilege accounts, even that of a printer account. So like I said in number 5 here, finally, you can elevate. So now this is a time to elevate privileges, move laterally, and quote unquote, right, have some fun. So let me show you what that next step looks like after you've gotten those credentials and what can you do. So now you have the credentials, you can use them as an initial foothold, but now you can elevate privileges and move around the environment to do more things, find more vulnerabilities. So the first one that I want to point out here, and like I said, just random graphic. I just took graphics and threw them there. You know, sometimes people want to put very specific things to their talk or very specific thing. I just took, I don't know, nuclear is the first one, right? Nuclear graphic. So what you can do here is that you can use the Bloodhound tool to enumerate OT Active Directory environments. With printer credentials, you can take those, pop them into Bloodhound, and to be able to map or to be able to show the entire Active Directory environment and potential attack vectors and areas where you can move to cause more damage, to find more vulnerabilities. All you need are those printer credentials in order to throw into Bloodhound. I've done it before. It's very easy. Second one, baby, right? Baby graphic. Second one, capture additional domain account hashes using printer credentials to perform a Kerber roasting attack. I've done this before too. So there are, and I could provide that maybe at a later time or maybe after this talk. There is a Python repository on GitHub called Impackets, and they have the capability where you can put in the username and the password of the printer credentials in order to find more accounts, just kind of go around the whole entire environment. And all you need are these low-level accounts, these printer credentials, in order to do additional Kerber roasting, right? So, or a Kerber roasting attack. So that'll pretty much, with that Impackets tool, you are able to put in the username and password, and then it'll return to you account hashes, typically machine account hashes. And you can use those to some offline cracking. And at times I've had some peers who have been able to even get domain admin credentials doing this with low level privileged accounts, such as those of a printer. Astronaut, the third one. You can search the web user interface for old print jobs that reveal sensitive company information. For those who have, I don't know, home printers or even have managed printers for enterprise environments, you know that sometimes printers can be janky, right? They can be in a situation where you can try to print something, but that job will cancel or it'll hold inside that machine. You can look at the cache, and in many printers, they have a capability where you can review the cache or even at times past print jobs where you can pull up full PDFs, full Visio documents of sensitive company information. And you don't even have to compromise somebody's machine. You don't have to compromise a Windows machine. You don't have to compromise servers. You can go directly with that administrative access to that printer. You can see sensitive print jobs for company information. I've seen drafts of company drawings and schematics about environments, network architecture. All of these I have seen within old print jobs of printers. Or you can use Alien, the last one. You can use Crack Map Exec, which is another tool, and other enumeration tools to find open file shares and interesting information. You can just take those credentials from that printer and just spray them towards the network. Now, that could be for a pen test, but definitely not for a red team. Crack Map Exec is very loud. It's something that's very noticeable by defenders. But if you notice that maybe that organization doesn't really have a lot of defenses in place, they don't have an active SIM, or if you're doing an internal pen test, you can set the standards or with the rules of engagement that you're not trying to be quiet in this activity. Crack Mac Exec and other enumeration tools will be completely fine, where you can utilize that username and password from those captured printer credentials and just spread them all across the network and look for no logins or even very low privilege systems where you might be successful in compromising some additional machines and searching for credentials on those machines. So this is that of lateral movement here. So these are some things, 4 different things that you can do with these low level credentials from printers. So moving on and kind of wrapping it up, and just want to give a few recommendations, right? Because I don't want you to just be stuck at okay, this is what I've done, or this is what people can do to me, or anything. I want you to have an understanding of what you can do to remediate these type of things. Strengthen OT password policies across the domain, right? I think that's something that's very important, because if someone gets this initial foothold, even if they get these printer credentials, if they're trying to move on to other systems, capture credentials, like I was saying with the Kerberos thing, they won't be able to crack these accounts if there are strong password policies in place. And also, that's another thing. I want to give you some more information about OT environments. Shared accounts are still a thing. It's still a thing, and typically don't follow any password policies. So that's another thing that you can do. Know what those shared accounts are, and then you can use additional controls, security controls, to try to protect those systems and assets. Maybe do some segmentation for the greater OT architecture or the OT network for those systems that they have shared passwords, because they're more vulnerable to these type of attacks. So these are some things that you can do within that number one. Second one is harden printers, protocols, ports, and services. Disable everything that you don't need. Sometimes printers come with some default. They come with default ports and protocols open already. You can harden these to maybe only use certain services, so these things can be compromised, or they can only certain systems can access these printers. That can be something else too. So using some type of NAC, network access control, to try to really deal with that type of situation. Regularly clear cache print jobs. Like I was mentioning before, you can get into printers, find all of the credentials, and find all of the cache print jobs and just go from there. There should probably be some type of activity where this is regularly cleared, and so that you don't have past and historical print jobs on these machines. And overall, change your printer default credentials. Change them from the normal or whatever the default credentials are. Because many times organizations would have maybe some type of third-party service come in and install these printers, and they're not looking at security as a consideration. They're not considering security in this type of environment. Security is typically handled at a higher level. But you, as a security practitioner, should go in there and recognize and look at the environment and change those default credentials, because anybody can do one of these type of attacks. And I kind of want to leave you with just a small story. So I was working with an organization. This was what's the best way to describe them? I'll just say this was an industrial organization. They had all types of industrial or electrical generation, distribution type of services. And the thing about them is that they put me into an internal pen test. and they had a shared environment between their IT and their OT. So when I did this pen test for them, the first thing that I did is that I went over. This was the first thing that I did. I did this printer hack, right? And I was able to elevate privileges from that printer to that of the point of contact that I had for that organization. So the point of contact typically with the pen test is somebody who works for the organization. Typically, they're like the lead security architect or the lead security defender person. I was able to go from printer credentials to that person's credentials, just like that. And it was so interesting to like have the executive out briefing and talking to the staff, talking to the organization and saying, hey, this all started, the initial attack vector for this attack were your printers. And they just couldn't believe it. They were like, no, we don't believe it. We don't believe their printers caused me to get to all their other systems and even the credentials and the access, the privileged access of the person that was sitting right across from me from that organization. And I think the thing about that is that, and that's why I give it the title of the it's a not very valued asset, but it can cause these type of effects. So that really is where I want to leave you all with, is that I don't think any rock should be left unturned in security, that we need to start to get more creative in our ways and methods of defending our environments. And just like I mentioned again, like no rock should be left unturned, not even your printers. Okay. So I want to leave you with that. These are my socials. Like I mentioned before, I'm on YouTube. Again, Struggle Security is the name of my YouTube channel. Please subscribe. Check out my content. It's mainly for that of people who are entry level to cybersecurity or people who are transitioning into the cybersecurity field, where again, the tagline is normalizing struggling in cybersecurity. And this is my Twitter here. It's ICS Gabe, Industrial Control System Gabe. Kind of speaks for itself, right? I've been in this field for years, and that's kind of my tagline that I've been going after for years. And these are things that you can follow me on. DMs are open. I have the email address for my YouTube channel. Also, DMs are open for my Twitter. And thank you. I really appreciate you all's time. And now I want to open it up for questions. And if there are any questions, it says lots of love from the chat. Questions. Okay. It says, funny, my home ESPN XP4100 home printer wants to update the firmware and software. Are home printers a problem? They can be, yes. So it's just that. So again, one of the prerequisites for this attack was that of a Microsoft Active Directory environment. So someone could compromise your home printer, yes. And they could kind of start to map out and look for other assets within your home. So if you have an Active Directory environment in your home, which some do, some people have home labs, they can elevate privileges and compromise different systems just from that ESPN XP4100 printer. So I would say first change the default credentials and then go from there. And really that default credential attack vector is really the main crux there, right? How else would I be able to gain access or administrative access to those printers if I didn't have access to those systems? So I think starting off by just changing that and then going from there. But yeah, it could be a problem. Yep. Any other questions? Let me see. Checking the chat. People are giving all their printer woes. I'm seeing them. Okay. So it seems like a network news report. It's because I've been doing YouTube for a little while now, so I kind of coming right here, straight to you type of thing. I'm not seeing any other questions. Let's see. Okay. Well, I think that's the end of my presentation. I have one more slide here, right? So one more slide here is that us at Accenture, just a quick, small little plug here, right? Us at Accenture, we're doing something called the OT Incident Response Experience. Myself, a gentleman named Brian Singer, he wrote the book on industrial hacking. Chris Rader, another one of my colleagues, but we're doing this, and feel free to reach out to me for more information. It's mainly like a training, very like immersive training for OT incident response type of engagements. I don't know if anybody's interested in that, but just wanted to throw that there for you all's viewing pleasure. If you want more information on it, feel free to jump in those DMs on Twitter or anywhere within my email for the Struggle Security website or the Struggle Security YouTube channel. And again, thank you. And I think that's it. Okay.